Serious, what's the most awkward date you've been on and what made it awkward? First date, halfway through the date she mentioned her boyfriend, who I was unaware of. I ask if he knows she's on a date with me and she says, oh, it's cool, he's in Iraq right now so he doesn't know or care. Then tries to change the subject. I turned the car around and took her home. Very awkward drive back. Wait, where are we going? Why are you taking me back? Who are you to judge me? We are basically broken up, I just haven't told him yet. Etc. etc. TL, Dr. Bitch almost made me a Jody. Nope. Edit, words. Edit number 2, thanks the gold. I lived with a group of guys who are Marines that are closer than family to me, so that made it that much more disgusting to me. Not a saint, but I'm no Jody. I'm thinking. It's kind of awkward, but quickly she's back into conversation like nothing happened, scarfing down her meal. Dinner is finished and we're having a cocktail at the same table, and it's been about 15 minutes since she came back. Then, all of a sudden a police officer comes up to our table and says, "Excuse me, Ms. Geeko006, is this your purse?" She replies yes. He says, "Come with me." She gets up and walks outside. Everyone in the restaurant is staring at me. I can see outside through the front door restaurant windows, and he's questioning her. Then he puts her in the car. Then they speed away. I'm left there in the restaurant feeling flabbergasted and really confused. Everyone is staring at me. Everyone. I'm sitting there with a shitty cocktail in my hand waiting for the check when the manager comes up to me and says, "Hi, you must be Geek00006. I'm very TLDR, first date. Thought she had poop problems. Turns out she had coke problems. Free meal and drinks. Dodged a bullet. Sorry about this." The young lady informed the officer this was your first date together, is that correct? I replied yes, and trying not to cause a scene I asked what the hell was going on. It appears that when she went to the bathroom, she left her purse behind when she returned to the table. One of the waitstaff found the purse and opened it to determine its owner. While doing so he did locate her ID, but next to her wallet was a bag of cocaine. We normally don't call the police in these types of situations, and I truly apologize, but the waitstaff in question did so without asking first. Sir, I'm very sorry. We've saved you a spot at the bar downstairs. Your meal and all drinks are on us tonight. We've even made arrangements and called a cab for you whenever you are ready. All of this is on the house this evening. I hope you come back and see us again. I've been wanting to tell this forever. I went to a dinner first date with a nice young lady. She was a little jittery, but I just assumed it was first date jitters. Dinner is going great, but she seems a little distracted most of the time and is fidgety. Again, I'm just thinking she's super nervous. Halfway through the meal she announces that she has to go to the bathroom. I make a stupid joke about hope everything comes out alright, and it doesn't go over too well. Dang, I screwed up. My date is gone for what seems like an eternity. I'm starting to think that I've been ditched on a first date, and my joke earlier definitely sealed the deal. She's still gone, and I've finished my meal. The waiter comes by what must be 5 to 6 times and asks if everything is okay. I calmly laugh and thank him for coming by so much. But then she comes back. Ouch, that bathroom trip must have hurt. We met up at a local burger joint, and he didn't say a single word. I asked questions and he responded with head nods and occasionally a chuckle that's more like a release of air. I was pretty sure he hated me, so I told him I was just going to go home. That's when he finally spoke. He asked me why and told me to please stay, so I did, and then he continued to sit in silence. Looking back now, I realize he was just nervous, but, man, at the time I really thought that I must have been horrible to be around. Update: we've been together for 2 years and he actually talks to me now. My friend made me go on a double date. I didn't want to go. But he said the girl was really cool and seemed up for it. That his GF showed her a picture of me and she liked me. So I figured, what the hell. We went to a cafe for some coffee and dessert and then an arcade/bar. The whole time at the cafe this girl wanted nothing to do with me. She literally said nothing. I asked her questions and she would nod her fucking head. At some point I wondered if she didn't speak English. To make it worse, my friends were oblivious. Didn't try to break the ice for her or anything. I clearly had been trying, so obviously she wasn't comfortable with that. When we get to the arcade I figure she doesn't like me, so I'm just gonna do my thing on my own. Then my friend comes up to me and is like, "Bro, are you retarded? How you gonna ditch her like that?" So I tell him how she's fucking mute or something. And seems to actively dislike me. Whatever, we leave, no problem. The ride back she is all talkative and shit with them, and when I ask her a question or chime in any way she would give me this "oh now you want to talk to me" attitude. Till this day my friends think I was the asshole on that date. Since we were both top of our class, they were hoping our children would be rocket surgeons or something. So, in conclusion, that was probably the worst date she's ever been on. I had a blast. Back in high school my parents and my friend's parents set us up on a movie date, X-Men 3, at the time we didn't know it sucked. However, no one told me it was supposed to be a date. I knew that we both liked nerdy stuff, but we hadn't ever hit it off before, so I didn't put the clues together. We got to the theater, and lo and behold my 2 comic-loving friends were there. I sat next to these friends the whole time, making jokes, I'm the juggernaut bitch, and having a grand old time, all the while ignoring my date. Didn't put 2 and 2 together until that night, when my mom wouldn't stop asking stuff like, "How did it go? And did you 2 have fun?" I was kind of dumbfounded, and I felt like an asshole. I ended up awkwardly apologizing for the whole thing to the girl later, but she was cool with it. We agreed our parents were weird for trying to play matchmaker, apparently. In 9th grade a girl I liked asked me to go to Disneyland with her. Her father worked there, so she got us free tickets, which was sweet, but a couple of days before we were meant to go she told me she didn't like me and that she understood if I didn't want to go to Disney with her anymore. Since I had never been to Disney before, I told her I still wanted to go. The day comes around and we go to Disney. She surprises me by telling me her sister and her sister's friend are coming. The car ride there was the 3 of them gossiping while I sat there awkwardly. Once we got to Disneyland she made no effort to make conversation with me or keep any conversation that I made with her going. She didn't want to go on any rides, so we just walked around until we met up with her sister again, and then she just talked to them. This made the whole day very awkward, and as a result I had no fun. He barely let me have a word in the whole time. He crapped on about a MMORPG I'd never played for a full 2 hours. Now, don't get me wrong, talking about gaming is interesting. But when someone goes into minute detail about aspects of a game you've literally just heard exists, excitement and enthusiasm can wane after the first hour. He had the worst fucking hay fever but wouldn't take an antihistamine. So he ended up snotting everywhere and spitting on the floor. Icing on the cake, he though it apt to bring up the subject of STDs, namely which were the most prevalent in our neck of the woods, and which ones had no symptoms. I bailed pretty fast at this point. Truth be told, I only stayed as long as I did because I was genuinely shocked at how terrible the date was and wanted to see if it could get any worse. This was several years ago now, but after a few dates with this girl we started getting into heavier questions about our sexuality. What do you like? What kinks do you have? Etc. During this conversation she asks, "Would you let me put spaghetti in your dick hole?" I was like, what? No. She retorts with, "Not even if it was cooked." My answer was still no. That's not what made it awkward. What was awkward was how upset and seemingly offended she was that I wouldn't let her put food in my penis. Edit, spelling. He was 20 minutes late, then took over the conversation. I think the conversation split was 80-20. His topics: how much money he makes, how much more money he will make in the future, how awesome his job is, how great his fraternity is, his views on foreigners. He especially explained to me how he believes that due to genetics black people can never be as smart as white people. Henceforth it is only logical that the living conditions in Africa are worse than in Europe, and that there are only a few black people on top. I am black. Edit, because Africa and Germany are not the same thing. He took me to Arby's. Whatever, it was in the middle of the day and I'm chill. He didn't pay for me, which isn't expected at all, just it ended up being awkward because the cashier commented on it. He then began to ask really odd questions like if I liked fat guys. He was heavy, but I mean I don't have a fetish or anything, so I'd what to say, and asked if I thought he should lose weight, etc. He also wore the cringiest outfit of a t-shirt with a WoW reference over top of a collared shirt with cargo shorts and a fedora. I wish I was kidding. Then halfway through our meal he grabbed my hands and said, "Love ahead, I love you," and I noped the fuck out. Oddly enough, he found me a while back on a dating site and said a lot had changed and asked for a second chance. I didn't respond. Expecting a snarky comment or disagreement. I paid for our drinks, told her I was leaving, and took the metro home. The weird thing is, she looked genuinely surprised and upset when I revealed this to her. Like everyone else who doesn't know a thing about cupcakes and baking. I told her I love to play volleyball and she tells me her university wasted space building a sand volleyball court, etc. etc. And by the way, this whole time she is super competitive and won't let me talk during her turn at Scrabble because she wanted to beat me. We're 3/4 of the way through the game and I'm getting fed up and suggest stopping the game and tallying up the score. I was winning comfortably. She goes, "Fine, do you resign?" I say, "Let's just count the score again," and she goes, "That's not how it works, you either quit and I win or we keep playing." So I resign and she proceeds to tell the people next to us how she won and blah blah. I don't regret what I did next. I told her basically what I wrote in the second paragraph and that she made it so I didn't even want to say something to her because I went out with a girl from Tinder to a board game bar, yes, a bar that has a bunch of board games for rent. I'm new to town, she suggested it seemed like. So we meet and rent Scrabble. The first question I ask her is how was her experience at the university she just graduated from. She rolled her eyes and told me she hates when people ask her about it. This foreshadowed the whole date. Every time I tried to ask her a question or start up conversation, she would always reply with an "I'm better than you" attitude or completely disagree with me, not in a cute flirty way. Some examples: I told her I like to travel and consider it a hobby. She replies with "That can't be a hobby and it doesn't take skill to travel," after I rightfully defend my POV. She told me she works at a bakery and I said I love red velvet cupcakes, they're the best. She proceeds to roll her eyes and says I'm just. Came to that, but I wasn't going looking for it specifically. Now, I'm not the most outgoing type of person, and would much rather know someone's personality before going out to meet them. This is where I figured online dating would be a good option. I had never given it a thought before, and my friends were the kind of people that made fun about how much of a loser you'd have to be to partake in online dating, but I figured this is 2013, it's not a big deal. For the most part it went all right. A few replies here and there. I had a few conversations with some girls who provided some decent enough conversations, but nothing that really made me want to go and meet them. Enter Bronte, let's call her that, anyway. Bronte was really funny, really laid back, we shared interest and some hobbies, and she had a gorgeous smile, as much as I could tell from her profile and Facebook. Have posted this story elsewhere, but it's too good not to share it again. Apologies for the wall of text, but I promise you it is worth the read. Around a year and a half ago, my girlfriend that I'd been with for around 4 years decided that she'd rather date some army guy she'd known for only a month, and dropped me to the curb for him. Whole other story, and needless to say, that sort of experience makes you reconsider your whole outlook on relationships. Because of that, I decided that I was going to take a bit of time off from relationships to just enjoy being myself. I had been dating my girlfriend since about a month after I finished university, so I'd never really known adult life as a single male without any study burdens. Anyway, after some time had passed, I decided I would try to get back out there again and just have some fun. I wasn't averse to anything serious if it actually really excited to meet her. Usually, I never know when is the right moment to ask girls out. I'm sure it's cost me relationships before, as they might think I drag out the talking phase too long. It wasn't like that with Bronte. I was really excited to actually meet her in person, so I just bit the bullet and said we should meet up for a drink. She was completely upfront and told me that she's had some bad experiences meeting guys online before, so would I mind if we met up, but in a group situation. This was honestly my worst nightmare. As someone who is sort of an introvert, meeting her face to face, let alone a whole group of her friends, was daunting enough. But I knew that I really liked what I'd learnt about her so far, so I psyched myself into it and went along. We ended up going to a local pub to play trivia. There were 3 or 4 of her friends there, and they were actually pretty fun people. One of them worked in IT, as did I, so we got along, and there were 2 other girls there, one of which looked a lot like Mila Kunis, so that was an easy in for a talking point. Anyway, the night went well, and afterwards, she gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek, telling me she really wants to meet up again, but one-on-one this time. I smile and tell her I'll call her and we can set it up. We go our separate ways. I call her the following night, and suggest Saturday night for our date. She's a music teacher, and will be out of town this weekend with a music excursion. She apologizes profusely but says if I don't mind doing the group situation again, all of her friends really enjoyed having me around and that I should go to trivia again. I didn't really want to let the whole group dynamic thing become too regular, but I really liked her, and she seemed to be genuine, so I went along. So I get to the pub on Tuesday night and they're all sitting at table, and Bronte waves me over. I go over and think, at least I can grab a seat next to her. I arrive at the table and there is a guy there that wasn't there the week before. He extends his hand and introduces himself as, let's call him Kyle. I'm a bit annoyed but shrug it off. Anyway, about half an hour into the trivia rounds I look over and Bronte has her hand on this guy's leg. I'm completely taken aback by this, but don't jump to any conclusions. Maybe he's a friend she's known for a long time, who knows. The night goes on and it's becoming very obvious that Kyle is her boyfriend. I have no idea when this happened, and while I'm keeping cool on the surface, I'm fuming underneath. I dragged my ass to a pub on a Tuesday night twice, to spend time with people I didn't know, and let's be honest, was only spending time with to get to know her better, and then she springs this on me. By this point I have absolutely zero interest in still being there. I don't want to be rude though, so I stay until the end of trivia. I completely stop participating though. I'm not rude, and I'm not really doing it intentionally, but my head is too full of confusion and frustration to actually be of any use. Trivia finishes and we're all hanging around outside, and they talk about going to a bar in the city for a few drinks. I politely say I need to be up early, I lied, and I go home. Over the next few days, Bronte keeps sending me FB messages, asking if I want to go to trivia again, asking if I want to meet up with her, very obviously in a friend way though. There's no more talk of dating. She eventually realizes that I'm not interested in hanging out anymore, and one afternoon she calls me, asking what my deal is. I explain to her that she has a boyfriend. She doesn't understand why this is a problem. I explain to her that when I meet someone on a dating website, ideally it would be for dating purposes. If there is a boyfriend involved, this is more or less a deal breaker. She, somehow, doesn't understand this concept and starts raving at me about how I'm a selfish prick. I try to explain that my actions were the opposite of selfish, but she is having none of it. She tells me that if I were to just put in a bit more effort, she would have slept with me regardless of her boyfriend. I tell her if that's the sort of person she is, I'm not interested in sleeping with her anyway. The funny thing is she stayed friends with me on Facebook, and occasionally makes comments on my photos or things like that. I've never met up with her again, but I sort of feel like I dodged a bullet. TLDR, meet girl on dating site, turns out she has boyfriend, tells me boyfriend doesn't matter and she'd sleep with me anyway, stays friendly despite awkward conversation. I thought it was a date, and she thought it was dinner. Sometimes when people ask others out, they don't say the word date, so the other person doesn't pick up that it is supposed to be a special date, not just a normal dinner. I'm a female and this is what I would always assume as well. If I've been asked to dinner with a man who isn't a close friend, I view it as a date. I will always offer to help pay the bill, which is usually declined, but I still want to offer. If it's a close friend, we go Dutch. If the close friend insists he pay for dinner, then it's a flag that he might be anticipating this was something more. I was 15 and very awkward and shy. A fellow 15-year-old, who was also very awkward and shy, asked me to be his date to this fireman's banquet thing to honor his father. I had no idea what to wear and ended up being incredibly underdressed. I also did not know the guy very well and we really didn't have anything to talk about. I didn't know anyone at this banquet except for him, so even more awkward. After many hours of silence and awkward comments from his family/friends about our date, it eventually came to an end. His brother dropped the both of us off at my front door while he circled the block to give us some privacy. As my date was saying goodbye and leaning in for the inevitable goodnight kiss, my mom opens the front door and asks why we're just standing there. The one time I've been thankful for her nosiness. We never really spoke again afterwards. He just wouldn't stop talking. Maybe he was amazingly nervous, but it was literally a non-stop loop of him talking. And that wouldn't have been so bad, but we went to see a movie after we grabbed a bite to eat, and even during the film, he kept murmuring to me throughout the whole thing. Imagine 4 or so hours with someone who's just talking at you with nary a pause. After a while, It just turns into a droning noise because I couldn't really interact with him in any way. I was exhausted at the end of it, and really glad I had driven myself to meet up, versus having him pick me up at home. It didn't help that any time he or I would touch hands brushing, walking around and accidentally bump into another, he would cringe visibly and move away. Like, why did he even ask me out? The world may never know. I declined his request for a second date. Her house, I said nothing. Just put it in park and hit the unlock button. She then took both of our Togo bags and ran off with her new end table. Pulled into the restaurant, she settled down a bit. We ordered our food. She answered a phone call at the table. It was a friend that had an extra ticket to a festival. She really wanted to go but had just started a job serving food at a restaurant. I suggested that she not call her boss and ask for the days off. I worked in the restaurant industry when I was younger, and I knew that her supervisor would not let her call off from her fifth weekend. She called her work anyway. She started crying when her boss said no. I felt bad for her boss, not her. Her boss fired her on the spot. I paid the check with both of our meals still steaming and untouched. On the way back to her house, we reached a stop sign. She jumped out of my truck and ran towards a trash pile. She came back with a hand-day-glow painted end table and threw it in the back of my truck. When I got to, I went on an OKC date once. The girl and I drove past a mattress and box, spring hand-wrapped in plastic. I drive a truck. She asked, and then insisted that I stop and get the box, spring / she wanted me to put it in my truck and then help her put it in her second-story walk-up apartment. I politely said no, I do not think that is a good idea. That there is a pretty solid chance of bed bugs because sealing an item is what you try first when you have those nasty little things. She was having none of it. I refused. She started crying, telling me that I don't know how it is to not have things and that it is easy for someone born with a silver spoon in their mouth to write off a free box spring. She didn't know me at all and made these assumptions based on who knows what. It was hard to hear since I came from absolutely nothing and worked my ass off to get to where I am. We don't see her at all, until third period. I get called into the counselor's office. Luckily, or unluckily I guess, I had a lot of issues during high school, so my counselor wasn't a stranger. She was really confused and told me that my date had come into her crying this morning that I tried to rape her. After a long explanation of what happened, she took my side and I never got in trouble for it. Needless to say, I broke up with her and moved to a different history class. Could have gone a lot worse, but definitely the worst date I've been on so far. TLDR, went on an ice cream date. Girl wanted me to shoot my web all over her, but with the other Spider-Man watching me, we got caught and I got accused of rape. Spider-Man popsicles. At this point I'm totally turned off, but she's like a raging fire and asks if I have a condom. Before I even say anything, I get a knock on my window to get the fuck out of here by the owner. At this point I'm thanking my lucky stars that I wasn't the one who had to be the bad guy. The study hall period was over and she gets dressed and I'm about to take her home. The drive home was awkward. She knew she went way too far, and with her parents being so strict, she was normally pretty conservative. I pull up her driveway, she's being all awkward and stuff. I tell her that it was okay, she just got carried away and we'll be more careful. She kisses me goodbye and I think everything is fine. I go to school the next day and I don't see her in the morning where we usually meet up. I'm confused, but don't think too much into it. A couple periods go by where I, mom and pop ice cream shop. We get a sundae and climb into the middle seats. We start sharing it, having a good time. We finished the ice cream and start making out. Now it was just turning spring, so this place hadn't been open for the season for long. It was crowded with lots of parents and children's getting their first taste of springtime with some ice cream. However, I hadn't gotten much action ever at this point in my life, so when she climbs onto of my lap cowgirl style and the making out gets a little heavier, I wasn't thinking much of it. All of the sudden, she takes off her shirt and bra in one swift motion, and at first I'm like boobs, until I realize she had no boobs. It was now obvious she stuffed her bra and she was basically as flat as a preteen boy. There was a family sitting at a picnic table literally 5 feet in front of my windshield with 2 children eating. Date tried to fuck me in full parking lot full of children and then tried to claim I raped her. I was a senior in high school, living in a suburb of Chicago. I had just started dating this chick from my history class, a year younger than me because I had just moved to this school and my schedule was all messed up. I was 18, just got my first car which was the family's minivan from before all my step-siblings moved out. Obviously we no longer needed such a huge vehicle, so my stepdad gave it to me for my birthday. Her family was extremely strict, we didn't get to hang out a lot outside of school hours. However, every Wednesday we had slightly shorter classes and then an extra period that was basically study hall where we could get help with any class we needed help with. So we had the brilliant idea of let's skip and go get an ice cream sundae. So we get in my minivan, go to this. Dates with only a month or so previously. A girl who I had forgotten I was dating. We didn't click that well and there was no major spark, and somehow I just stopped seeing her. As in, I just forgot she existed and I stopped contacting her. So she just stops hearing from me, has been given no indication we are over or anything like that, and then walks into me on a date with someone else. I still feel absolutely awful about doing that. But it also created one of the most awkward experiences I've ever had on a date. TLDR, on a date with one girl I ran into another girl whom I forgot I had already been dating. Edit, should make it clear I'm 35. These dates were in the mid to late 90s. No one had mobile phones and email wasn't really a big thing, so contact wasn't as simple as a text, IM, email etc. simpler times. Lol. Was 16 years old, met a girl at a house party. Was fairly drunk at the time, but we ended up getting on and subsequently getting off. It was a Halloween party. She was dressed as a witch. Before she left that night, I asked her to come out the next day and she agreed. Met her the next day and the first thing that struck me was that her witch outfit hadn't needed quite as much makeup as I'd hoped. Still, she was a really nice girl so it wasn't a deal breaker, and I was going to make the most of the date. Wasn't a great date tbh, stifled conversations and not many shared interests. So when we were walking through the high street and I saw a group of my friends, I jumped at the chance to say hi and introduce them etc. So I wave, they come over and I point at each as I say, Richard, Anthony, Rob, this is. I point at her and only then did I suddenly realize I had forgotten her name. Totally. It occurred to me I wasn't sure I'd ever actually known it. I still cringe so hard at this even now, but in my blind panic all I could think of, after a long silence, was. Actually, I'm not going to tell you her name, Richard'll only hit on her. Not a good save. TLDR, publicly forgot the name of the girl I was on a date with and made it more cringy with attempts to recover. Also, a second pretty awful date experience, I was on a second date with a girl I was into, I was about 17. Things were going really well. After a good meal and a nice walking chat we went to the cinema. As I was coming out of the film with her and walking through the foyer I was instantly rooted to the spot with shock. Now I honestly don't really have a good explanation for this next bit. But what had caused the shock was almost walking into another girl. A girl who I had been on 4 to 5. I knew a girl who waitressed at a restaurant I frequented every Sunday with my family. We became one of her favorites very quickly, and I started taking a strong liking to her too. We both shamelessly flirted back and forth whenever we saw each other. One day, as we were leaving, she asked what I was doing that weekend, and before I could respond, she got embarrassed and said, "Oop. Can't let my boss see me chatting. Sorry, bye." I left my cell number on a comment card and left it at our table. She texted me that night, and we set up a date. I kinda dressed up a bit, nothing fancy. Nice jeans and a collared, button-up shirt. She showed up in basketball shorts and a t-shirt. We talked quite a bit, and actually had a pretty good time. The bill came while she was in the bathroom, and I paid it in full while she was gone. She came back, and so did the receipt about the same time. When she found out I had paid for dinner, she was like, okay, thanks. We sat and talked for a little bit more until we started talking about past relationships. She brought it up. I asked her about some stuff, and she kept mentioning past girlfriends. Conversation kept going, and I eventually broke down and asked if she identified as a lesbian, bi, or straight. I can't remember how I phrased it, but let's just say I did it in the most suave way possible. She just laughed and was like, "I was wondering when you'd ask that. I don't like to put a label on it, because I don't like being limited like that." At that point, I wasn't even sure what her intentions were. She kept commenting on how polite I was being, and it became clearer that she was so impressed by my politeness because this wasn't a date. We spent the next 2 hours trying to clarify each other's intentions. But neither one of us had read the situation right at all. I still don't know what she was looking for, and she thought it was weird and kind of offensive that I just assumed that she was interested in me like that. TLDR, lesbian/bisexual/pansexual/not straight girl, didn't know that at the time, asked me out on a date, then gets offended when I assume that she liked me like that. Away. Said, "Shh, don't let the others know." I go to the bathroom and text my friend that I'm on a weird date, but that I'm all in and I'm going to see how this plays out. Spend about 3 hours in the living room with these people. The aunt is flat on the couch the whole time. The pregnant girl never says anything. The cousin is cool. He's a good kid. Probably 13 years old or so. The aunt keeps making vile sex jokes. Right in front of her son. Talks about putting pop rocks in her underpants so she can, achieve orgasm discreetly. Finally the aunt goes to bed. Rachel turns the lights off and we decide to watch a movie. The volume is so loud it's hurting my ears. It's just fucking blaring. The cousin kid is still there, and the pregnant woman is next to the TV, facing us, staring. Rachel decides now is a good time to make out. Well, fuck it. So we're making out with 2 people. Watching us while this movie blares. Cousin kid was trying to make jokes and Rachel was like, "Mind your own business. Grow up." While we make out on the couch next to him. We finally go to her bedroom, which has a mattress on the floor. Yada yada yada, she tells me I'm probably the one, and starts reciting poetry to me. I walk of shame past the cousin kid and the pregnant girl while the movie still blares. Met a girl online, Rachel. We messaged a little bit, met up for drinks and hit it off. A week later, time for our first real date. She invited me over, said she was gonna make me dinner and we'll see what happens from there. What happened from there? Knock on the door, some slack-jawed kid answers. I see an older woman lying prone on the couch behind him. Right then Rachel calls and tells me she's running late, but make myself at home, she'll be there in half an hour. Turns out Rachel lives with her aunt, 2 cousins, and some random girl. Sitting in a rocking chair in the corner is a heavily pregnant woman, with one hand resting gently on her belly, staring vacantly into space. Rachel shows up and makes me dinner. She heats up plain noodles, then dumps a shitload of parmesan on top. Voila! She pours a glass of flat, warm, root beer and then tops it off with some scotch she had hidden. All he kept talking about was weed. How much he loves it, how much he does it, how amazing it is. It was just weed, weed, weed. I'm totally cool if you like to smoke and all, but if it's the only thing you're capable of discussing while on a date at a museum, then just no. I met a cute woman while out and about and we hit it off. I asked if she was single. She said yes. I asked her out on a date a few days later. She showed up with her boyfriend. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, looked at it, and said, "Oh, man, work emergency, I have to go. I'm very sorry." I never saw her again. I invited another woman out on a date, she was a friend of my friend. We went to a nice wine bar. She started flirting with the bartender in front of me. I was taken aback, of course. I put down enough cash to pay for my drink, told her something like "this isn't how dates work," and walked out. She asked if I was going to pay for her drink, and I laughed and told her the bartender could if he wanted to, but I sure wasn't going to. Never saw her again, and told my friend to never met up again. Luckily, the next date was with my now wife, and that was much better. Mine is not really a date, but you'll see where I'm going with this. A good female friend of mine asked me to prom as just friends and I didn't have any other prom to go to, we're both homeschooled, so I said yes. So I went out and got the tux and everything and I almost got a corsage but in the end decided not to, and thank God I didn't. It starts at 6 so she says she's riding with a group of friends and they'll be there about 5:45. I get there 5:35 and wait and then at 5:58 she finally shows up. With her date. Let's just say it was very awkward all around. Went to a football game in high school that my friend's sister set me up on. The girl had a weird name when we were introduced and I figured I'd find it out later instead of having the awkward what. 5 times, besides who says a person's name when they talk to M right. Well, a buddy of mine ended up being there too and saw me in the stands. He ran up with that shitty smile like he caught me on a secret date and asked who's this, in front of her. My mind went into oh shit mode and my first reaction was to use the loudness around us to fake a similar sounding mash of letters to what I heard earlier. He just continued saying what? About 8 Felicia Fashishi later her face went into her hand and she said Felicia, foolish e-ah. We were silent the rest of the time. Let's see. It was the second date. I met her on Tinder. I had her over to my place, we smoked, and put on a movie. She spent some of the time clearly messaging other people on Tinder, then she fell asleep on my bed. She picked the movie, it sucked, and I watched the whole damn thing. She woke up, didn't apologize, we kissed, she left. tried another date, we spent the day hanging out with her friends, and everything seemed fine. Later we went back to my place, she picked another movie, she fell asleep again. She woke up and I jokingly gave her a hard time about it, seeing as this was the second time she'd done that, and she told me "you don't know me very well," in an annoyed tone, and left. The next day I asked her if she was okay, seeing as she woke up last night in an obvious bad mood, and so I was wondering if something had bothered her about last night. She told me she didn't want to see me anymore and that she wasn't ready for this, and then blocked my number so I couldn't respond. Swell girl. 8/10, would take her out to a nap any time. Met a girl online one time, seemed to be going really well. We exchanged numbers and started texting. We decided to finally meet after a week or so of texting, so we decided on a local restaurant on a Friday night for dinner. I was waiting in the lobby and she walked up smiling. As we shook hands I started to say "nice to meet you," but was cut off halfway through saying it as she let out an earth-shattering fart. I'm pretty sure it was a 7 on the Richter scale. And the smell was just fucking rancid, I can't even describe it. I dropped my smile and kind of looked around at some of the employees and they looked at me like "run dude, just run." I ended up just saying "I gotta go" and walked away. She wasn't fully my type anyway. Oh well. I think he probably would approve. He hasn't killed you yet, which is a great sign. Just do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Shia LaBeouf. If you care about her enough to announce to the world you are thinking of marrying her, marry her. Edit, quote credit, Shia LaBeouf. Met this Filipino girl through a board game meetup on meetup.com. She was one of the few girls at the events and we hit it off quite well. I drove her back and then asked if she wanted to go out with me. She said yes and we made plans to go to a street festival downtown the next weekend. As soon as we met for that second date I could immediately tell something was different about the way she was acting, but I couldn't understand why. We go into a pub, I buy us a couple of drinks, and she starts to get rather serious. "Biker, I have to tell you something." "Okay. What is it?" "I'm married." "What?" Turns out she met her US husband online, he came to the Philippines, married her, and then went back to the US for some reason. She was now living in Canada, and he was still in the US. I'm not totally sure what was going on with her, other than I think she was just lonely. I hunt out with her for a while for the rest of the festival and didn't see her again after that, although we were friends on Facebook for a while. Eventually her husband did come to Canada, and they had a kid together. Still the most awkward date of my life, although there are one or two others up there as well. Yeah, he probably didn't fully read your profile. You know how many guys I've met off of there that were shocked on how tall I was. It clearly says it on the profile. Thanks for making it obvious that you were just drooling over my pics and not reading my, pretty short and to the point, profile. How's it feel that not having sex with you can ruin somebody's life? I figured. People are notoriously oblivious of others' intentions. I was kidding, and actually figured somebody would follow up with some sort of "it's now your duty to have sex with everyone" kind of joke. People are fragile, and it's not your fault. We're all just clusters of various interactions, memories, etc. Small town, and she hasn't had a real girlfriend in quite a while. Well, holy hell, we are on a date. I'm straight. And happily married. I think she saw the look on my face when I realized I was on a date with her. She immediately asked me if I was a lesbian, to which I let her down gently and said I wasn't. It actually wasn't that awkward after that. We laughed about it, finished our dinner, and she dropped me off at home. She even came in and apologized to my husband for taking his wife on a date, which he thought was hilarious. She did still pay for my dinner though. About 3 years ago I was out at the bar with a few friends, and I went to the bathroom. I am female. There was a girl in there who started talking to me. She was really fun and we ended up partying all night at the bar together and having a great time. She asked for my number, and I was a little intoxicated, and gave it to her so we could party again sometime. Well, that week she called me and asked if I wanted to meet up for dinner on Friday and some drinks. I agreed, since I'm always game to make new friends, and have drinks. She said she would pick me up so I didn't have to worry about driving. Sounds good to me. Well, she takes me to this really nice Italian restaurant, orders us both wine, and tells the waiter to put it all on one bill. At this point I realize that this is a little different. Then she starts talking about how it is so hard to meet women around our popcorn. We go and walk into the theater. He sits down in the very front row, and I shit you not, finishes the popcorn and the drink by himself before the movie even began. As soon as the lights dimmed and the movie was actually starting, he immediately leaned over and tried slamming his face against mine. WTF. I leaned away, awkwardly chuckled and excused myself to the bathroom, where I then ran out of the theater and went home. Horrible. My friend set me up with one of her friends. We agreed to meet at the movie theater at 5 o'clock to catch the 5:30 movie. I arrive at the movie theater at 5 o'clock, and he's not there yet. That's fine, maybe he's running a few minutes late. At 5:10 I decide to text him and ask where he is. He says he's rounding the corner, walking in, and that I should go buy us tickets and he'll buy the snacks. Okay. Not a problem, whatever. I buy us the tickets and this man, about 6 inches shorter than me, reeking of wet dog and dressed in a Hawaiian button-down and swim trunks, taps on my shoulder and smiles at me, saying let's go grab the snacks. Now, I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I try to not judge people right off the bat. We walk up to the concessions and he buys a junior-sized popcorn, and a small root beer. I don't drink root beer. Was he expecting us to share the smallest drink and... Long-time lurker, but I had to make an account and contribute to this topic. After talking with a girl for a week or so, we decided to go out for dinner. Dinner itself lasted about an hour. There were a couple of awkward lapses in conversation, but other than that I thought we had a good time and a rather normal first time out. I offered to pay and walked her to her car, and that was the end of the night. We planned to discuss over text a second dinner for next week. About 10 minutes into my drive home I received a text message from her. If you're not interested in me, that's fine. I was taken aback considering the night had gone well. I responded back, I'm not sure where this is coming from. I thought we had a good time. I will never forget the next thing she said to me. I'm into you, but you haven't even used an emoji once when we've texted. Maybe I'm wrong, but early 20s. Flagging non-emoji use as a deal breaker seems odd to me. I don't really use a lot of emoji. Didn't realize that was important. It was at this point my feelings began wavering on the entire situation. Her next response made me realize I needed to nope the fuck out of this. If you don't use an emoji, how am I supposed to know you have emotions? Do you have emotions, or are you some psychopathic killer? I responded back telling her I felt we should cancel our discussion about dinner in the future, as this probably wasn't going to work out. She proceeded to text me rapid fire for 2 hours and call my phone non-stop, leaving voicemails. I didn't read the text or listen to the voicemails, except for the final one in which she told me the date was a huge waste of time and that I am going to die alone. To her credit, I've not dated since, so she might be right. We've been together for 2 years. Nothing like sitting in a pool of your own blood on your first date ever. Bonus pic for proof. Gore/NSFW. TL/DR, day drinking, first date nerves and abandoned buildings do not mix. Okay, not sure if this would be classified as awkward, but it was by far the most fucking embarrassing situation of my life. I was 18 years old, going on my first date ever with a boy from school. Yay. Decided to day drink to get rid of nerves, and met up with him at a local abandoned building where we planned to take photographs. All going super well, no awkward silences, until we both decide to find somewhere discreet to go to the toilet. On my way back, my euphoric/drunken self decided to take a shortcut climbing through a broken window. And tripped climbing through, slashing a 9-inch cut through my right arm. Classed as severe lacerations, down to the gross yellow layer of fat in my arm. Sheesh. Luckily got back to my date, and he was an awesome hero and got an ambulance, and we spent the rest of the day in hospital getting stitches. Incredibly, it didn't put him off, and she showed up drunk. Not pre-gamed a little, but not able to walk straight drunk. The date was great. I asked her immediately what was up, and she swore up and down she wasn't drunk. Even after I told her it was fine, but I just wanted to know, we then went to a restaurant, where she ordered the most expensive thing on the menu and then ate one bite of it and wanted to leave. That's when I walked her back to the train station. The best part was 2 days later, when she finally admitted to having been totally wasted. I told her I wasn't going out with her again since she lied to me, and she informed me it wasn't a lie because there was a weird half hug involved, too. I got her hash and asked her out again. I even made a joke about this time being much better/less pressure etc. She said yes, and then a minute before I was leaving, her friend from out of town got sick, so she couldn't leave her dorm because she had to take care of the friend. I saw her later that night when we were out. Good times. This probably won't compare to most, but in college I was set up on a blind date that my friend wanted to turn into a bit for our radio show. I was nervous as fuck. The girl showed up about 15 minutes late, but neither of us noticed, so we both stood outside this pizza place for an extra 10 minutes or so. When we got in, I offered to grab her a slice and something to drink or whatever she wanted, but she said no to all of that and just sat down at a table. Once I got my food and sat down, she then got up and bought her own drink. Then we basically sat in awkward semi-silence while I ate. I didn't even finish my food. She kept mentioning some party her dance team was having, and that she should probably get going. She invited me to the party, but it was obvious she was being nice and didn't want me to go. We walked outside, said bye, and then started walking in the same direction. Oh, and had not uttered a single word. I sat at a proper distance next to her and stared for a few seconds on the TV screen that showed Beverly Hills Cop 2, which started a few minutes earlier. As I have already seen the movie more times than many times, I was naturally taken to the evening's most important question. What do you want to do? You want to see a movie? The silence that greeted me was both astonishing and utterly unexpected. Her gaze was firmly anchored to the flicker of the television. I assumed that she simply did not hear my question, so I repeated it, but this time a little higher. A sign of life appeared. The girl's head turned towards me and our eyes met for a moment. An answer would surely be absolutely optimal in this situation, but I guess she disagreed. Instead, she looked down to the floor, while she giggled a little primary school-like, as if to signal that her entire existence was monumentally embarrassing. This was something new. With 10-minute intervals I repeated similar questions for the next hour, but the real answers seemed to be permanently replaced by the nervous giggles. Because the whole thing now turned into a guessing game, I guessed that she was pleased with the film that was shown on television, and thought she probably would soften with time. I guessed wrong. The film ended, "What do you want to do?" Questions hailed as a monsoon against her eardrums, and all I got in return was the nervous laughter. I started to get a feeling that I had made a fatal mistake. Time passed, albeit slowly, and soon we had spent 4 hours without dialogue. It was 2 o'clock at night, and I felt that something needed to be done. The only problem was I had no idea what. Without the slightest hint of reaction from her side, I moved to the computer, which is located only a few meters from the couch, and logged into Facebook to seek help. Unfortunately, none in my entire circle of friends ever experienced anything like this, so I was left all alone. Time continued to pass without any change. I started wondering if she was heading home anytime soon, but when I realized that the subway probably wasn't running this late, I gave up on that idea. I figured out I probably had to stay awake until the subway started running again. She must surely go home sometime, I thought. This situation must be just as uncomfortable for her as it is for me, I tried to tell myself. These thoughts were soon interrupted by the clearest example of me being wrong imaginable. From her handbag she suddenly picked up a mobile charger. She began to charge her phone. She made herself at home. She was about to move in. I was sweaty and completely panicked. How could it go so wrong? After a moment of hyperventilating in panic, I decided to calm down and make the best of it. Namely, to wait a little and see if anything happened. But of course, nothing. What was even worse was the fact that the subway by now had started running again, yet she showed not the slightest interest of wanting to go home. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was now desperate. The desperation made me be bold, so I decided to play out my finest plan. I went to bed. Fully clothed, of course, because I did not know what the now very unwelcome visitor was capable of. The very weird girl sat still on the sofa and watched the same TV channel which had been on all night. My last thought before I fell asleep was the wish that she would be gone when I woke up. About 6 hours later, at 1300 hours, I woke up. I knew at once that something was not right, and just as always I was correct. Beside me, in the bed, was a girl. Fortunately, she was also fully clothed. She slept so heavily that the mountain she had tried to climb in her mind the night before appeared as light as a feather in comparison. I went again to the computer, hoping to get help from someone who had been in a similar situation, but to no avail. All I got was laughter and phrases like "this was the most fun I've ever heard." I realized the only thing I could do now was wait for her to wake up on her own. I dared not to wake her, because a girl who said nothing in 15 hours certainly could be a cold-blooded killer. Said and done. A long wait began. 3 hours later she woke at last, of course without saying anything. After about 10 minutes she crept into the bathroom. I noticed that she never lit the lamp, but despite this, it took 20 minutes before she came out. Without flushing or anything. What she did in there, only the stars can tell, and it will probably forever remain a mystery. I hoped that she in the pitch-dark bathroom would have decided to go home, but I wasn't that lucky. Instead, she went quietly back to the bed and sat down and thought about something. What she was thinking about I have no idea, but if I have to guess then maybe it was something like, "I have to be quiet, otherwise he will get angry." I gave her a little more time, but when the clock was getting closer to 17:30 without her even so much as looking toward my front door, I had to put a sinister plan into action. I had to lie. "Hey, I'm going over to a friend of mine, so you have to go." I was greeted, not the least bit surprising, by absolutely nothing at all. I could only guess whether she had even received my clear message or not. 15 minutes later, it appeared, however, that she certainly had heard what I. This is going to be a very long and weird story. I translated this from a blog post I wrote in Swedish, so it will probably be full of errors. It all happened a few years back when I made the fatal mistake of commenting the news on the internet with my own Facebook account. The consequence of this was that a girl sent me a friend request. She was a total stranger, but despite this, she started writing to me almost immediately. This was not in any way especially unpleasant, although her approach was a bit too on. It was not long, and now we are talking about only a few occasions when we messaged each other, before she began to describe how much she loved me and would think it was wonderful to meet me. Here, only a few days after we started talking to each other, started a very complicated campaign to try to invite herself into my apartment to watch a movie. The tactic was crystal. Said, because now she began to get dressed. The jacket took millions of years to put on, but I could not care less. Victory was near. Or, well, it was probably more of a relief than a victory. When she looked ready, I opened the door and she stepped out. "Bye. Bye," she replied. She had said a word. A word in 20 hours. It must be some kind of a record. I mean, I am a social misfit myself, but compared to this, no, it cannot compare. It is absolutely impossible. I had a girl in my home for 20 hours before she said a single word. I have in my entire life liked the Swedish saying, "Speech is silver, silence is golden," but now I realize that it needs to be rewritten. Speech is silver. Silence is golden, but only if done in moderation. Otherwise it's just uncomfortable. It is clear in any case that I never intend to kindly invite someone into my home again. You only get punished for it. And the punishment is gruesome. TLDR, girl didn't say shit. Around 2200 hours I got a text saying she was outside my door. I asked her to call on the intercom so that I could open, and now something happened that made me a little concerned with how the evening would proceed. Her answer was, "What's your name then?" 3 thoughts now fought in my head. These were, 1. Okay. 2. What? 3. What the fuck does she mean now? After a short text message exchange that ended with me having to say my name, she finally pushed the intercom button so I could electronically open the house's front door. Then I went to my apartment door to open, and wait for her to get herself up the no more than 10 steps that now stood between her and me. I heard how she incredibly slowly dragged herself up the stairs. An eternity passed, and in my imagination, I start to wonder if she was trying to empathize with how the final steps up to Everest's peak must be in reality. It took over a minute before she finally came in sight, and you would think that everything was fine now. But absolutely not. No, no, no. It was now that the strange began for real. Like the vast majority of Westerners who ever lived, I greeted her with a simple hello. To my surprise, I received no answer, but I assumed she was still into the Everest scenario and thus had no strength left to answer. I did not care about that, but let her trailing footsteps into my apartment. Here she began a project that apparently was even harder than climbing Everest, which was to take off her jacket. Just as a quick side note, I would like to point out that this was during the summer, so a jacket made very little sense. After my beard had grown considerably waiting for the jacket removal to be finished, she was finally ready. I offered her to sit on the sofa, and without responding, she did. Still, she. Clear, nagging. Nag, nag and nag. And to succeed with this tactic her apparent plan was to nag some more, and then even more. Yes, you got it. Anyway, it lasted for a long time before I felt that I probably should give in. Being kind can hardly hurt, even though I wasn't very interested in starting something with her, or to let her get in touch with my magic wand. Thus, I decided to show to all the world's gods that I deserve a place in heaven, so I invited her over to me to watch a movie. However, I had one condition: she would be the one who decided everything. And with everything I really mean just about everything: what movie we would see, what we would talk about and what we would do. This proved to be an idea inferior to writing the PIN number directly on the ATM card, but now we jump events in advance. Some days later we had decided that she would come to visit, and sure enough. I went on a date with a girl from OkCupid. She was a teacher, so I figured the crazy level was within an acceptable range at least. Things started off fine, the conversation was flowing well and we both seemed fairly into it. Then, out of nowhere, she says, "Oh my God, stop looking at me." Okay. Maybe she isn't into me. Oh well, I'll just keep the conversation going until we're done with dinner. Inevitably, through talking, I find myself, making eye contact with her as you tend to do when speaking. She chides me again for looking at her. Gone is the time for niceties. I sarcastically look away and say, "So, how about those sports team?" She half apologizes and we continue to talk. I start telling a story that leads to a fairly punctuated ending, and right as I lead up to it, she says, "Oh my God. Stop." Oh. I pause for a beat and continue. No. Seriously, stop. Silence. She waits a beat and takes a deep breath. Okay, go on. I hit the punchline, and look over. It must have been pretty funny, 'cause her face was pretty animated. It continued to be. For the next 20 minutes. Turned out, she was narcoleptic, and apparently one of the side symptoms is that while experiencing intense emotions, such as nervousness or laughter, your face can kind of freeze into place for a while. Awkward end of date, never saw her again. Felt like a scene from Deuce Bigalow or something. A girl I met on Plenty of Fish. We talked for a few weeks, then we hung out for a couple hours. I wasn't really feeling it, and we lost contact for a few months. She ends up calling me up and wanted to come drink at my house at midnight. So she heads over and drinks. I find out she is a paranoid schizophrenic, which now makes sense with other behaviors, and that she hasn't taken meds in 2 years. The rest of my night was spent keeping her from crying and screaming, while waiting for her to sober up enough to drive. TLDR thought, sex, got skits. I found out during that she was actually married. Not even legally separated, or something. No, I did not go on another date with her. Ouch, what a bummer. Yeah. Before the date she seemed pretty awesome. But a woman who dates other dudes while married, behind her husband's back. Not awesome. She was not in an open relationship, nor was her husband aware of the date. Had that been the case, I still wouldn't have had a second date, but at least I'd not have thought she was a cheating bitch. If you've ever seen Arrested Development, picture an egg. I think she said about a dozen syllables throughout the entirety of the meal. She just kind of sat there, looking around and not really responding to anything I said. Brought her back to her dorm afterwards, then went back to mine. No second date. Before I get into the bulk of this awkward date, I need to give a bit of backstory. I met this girl through a coworker at his wife's birthday party. I'm not quite sure what sealed the deal for me, whether it was my off-key singing, my rhythmless dance moves or my awkward conversation, but by the end of the night I had her phone number. The next day, after I overcame the initial shock of this actually happening, I texted her, and she surprisingly responded. We talked for a few days and she agreed to a date. If you're still with me at this point, I assume that you are as surprised by this chain of events as I was. I spent tens of minutes poring over every single detail before the date actually happened. I'm a guy, it doesn't take me very long. I made sure my hair looked nice, my clothes matched and my breath didn't stink. I picked her up in my extremely impressive Chevy Cavalier, A. Obligatory jokes about how the meal must be free. Eventually, the meal was paid for and we went back to my car. This is where the night comes to a screeching halt. As I turned the key in the ignition, my heart sank. My car refused to turn over. Naturally, I made the obvious joke and exclaimed, "I swear this has never happened before," suavely, following it up with, "I heard a lot of guys have performance issues." I stared meekly under the hood and then made 2 phone calls. First, to a friend to come pick us up, and second to a tow company to take my car to a shop. Then, because we were right outside a bar, we went inside for a few drinks while we waited. My friend arrived far more quickly than the tow truck. Thankfully, he had no idea what was wrong with the car either, so I didn't look like a total doofus. He then joined us at the bar for what was the absolute definition of a third wheel situation. Now, I have to give him credit for sitting off to the side and letting my date and I talk on our own. But it also ended up feeling like a parent-chaperone date, where your dad tries to make himself scarce by sitting 2 tables away from you. It got even weirder after the tow truck came. Since my friend was driving us home, my date sat in the back seat. And since I didn't know what else to do, I sat in the back seat with her. I never went on any dates before I was able to drive, but I am now abundantly aware of how awkward they would have been to have a chaperone. We alternated between hushed conversations in the back seat and trying to include my friend in the front seat. And by the time we dropped her off, I wasn't sure if I wanted to lock myself in my room and listen to angsty music or for my friend to pat me on the shoulder and say, "I'm proud of you, sport." Is that how middle school dates ended? I don't have that car anymore and there was no second date. I'm still friends with the guy who picked us up though. And if I ever find myself in a similar situation, he knows to show up wearing a suit and pretend to be my chauffeur. TLDR, car broke down on first date. Had a friend chaperone. Middle school levels of awkwardness. Vehicle that obviously says I save money on gas so I can buy you nice things. I did the gentlemanly thing and opened her door for her, walked around to my side, got in and started the car. This was my first indication that something might be wrong. My car struggled to start. In the 9 years of having the car, I'd never really had any trouble with it, and it still started on the first try, so I figured I'd just get it looked at later. I drove to the restaurant, parallel parked, terribly, and we sat down for a nice dinner. Dinner itself went well, I think. To most outsiders, I would have seemed like a guy that doesn't regularly put his foot in his mouth during normal conversation. Unfortunately, after our food was done, the waitress apparently forgot that we were supposed to pay and the 2 of us sat there an extra 30 minutes desperately trying to flag down a waitress while making. Went on a group date with a boy who acted opposite my best friend in a play. It wasn't really a group date, more like I tagged along with her group of friends from the play and him. Her friends were really nice to me, but he was sick and petrified of the group judging him, so he said next to nothing. One of the members of that group even joked about it, saying, "Is this the most awkward date you've ever been on?" And I had to awkwardly stammer out something as inoffensive as possible. I've been with that same boy for almost 2 years now. Didn't go so bad after all. Friends set me up on a blind date. The guy told me how he used to work at Hardee's when they still served fried chicken. He said he was in charge of the chicken, so all day he'd be smelling chicken blood while seeing his cute female co-workers. Now the smell of chicken blood turns him on. Friend and I need to stop at home. The sun is up, I've sobered up, he's too tired to complain. He thanks me for the amazing conversation and the mushroom pasta. I leave. He will message me every day for 6 months asking what I'm doing. Fuck Eugene Felipe. Book on Kant. I fill my wine glass with water. He spends a straight hour reading from the book and explaining. I've sat in the same spot the whole time. The metro is now closed and I'm guessing I'm a $60 cab ride away from home. I check my bank balance in the toilet. $4. No credit card. Holla. I realized if I could keep him talking, I could probably avoid an awkward "I don't actually want to sleep with you because you lied about having a dinner party to get me to come over" convo. It's also like minus 28 degrees Celsius and I want to stay inside. If I can keep it going long enough, the metro will reopen and I can go home. That's what I do. From 12 a.m. until 5:30 a.m., he talks and talks and talks. About himself and his money and his ailments and politics and theories and philosophers and how he saw something I posted on Facebook in 2009. Finally, it's time to go, I say. I'm having brunch with A. Invited to a dinner party at a guy's house, a friend of a friend. He lived at the end of the metro line. I show up, nobody is there but him. I brought a bottle of wine. "What's for dinner?" I ask. He says, "I thought we could throw something together." I'm barely holding it together. He says, "I don't really know how to cook." I made him dinner, a weird mushroom pasta and a weird beet salad, because homeboy doesn't do groceries. Homeboy is a political science, philosophy double major. I know nothing about either. We sit to eat, it's about 11. We eat dinner late in Quebec. He's telling me about himself, I've opened my bottle of wine. He doesn't want any. Nod, right, what was that? Right, Before I realize it, I've finished the entire bottle of wine. He says, "Did you wanna go to sleep?" He gestures to the bedroom. He has a boner. I say, "No, smile, what were you saying about that?"